Sarah Martinez had always dreamed of wearing the uniform. As a little girl growing up in a small Texas town, she would watch the military parades on television with wide eyes, imagining herself marching in perfect formation with the other soldiers. Her father, a Vietnam veteran who rarely spoke about his service, would sometimes catch her playing soldier in the backyard, using a stick as a rifle and her mother's old scarf as a flag. He never discouraged her, but she could see something distant in his eyes whenever he watched her play. When Sarah turned 18, she didn't hesitate. Against her parents' worried protests and her high school counselor's suggestions to consider college first, she walked into the Army recruitment office on Main Street with her head held high and her mind made up. The recruiter, Sergeant Williams, was a kind man with gentle eyes who spent hours explaining the commitment she was about to make. He talked about the challenges, the sacrifices, and the honor of serving her country. Sarah listened to every word, but her decision had been made years ago. Basic training at Fort Leonard Wood was everything she had expected and nothing like she had imagined. The physical demands pushed her body beyond limits she didn't know existed. The mental pressure tested her resolve daily. But Sarah thrived in the structured environment. She excelled in marksmanship, leadership exercises, and tactical training. Her drill sergeant, a tough woman named Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, saw potential in the young recruit from Texas. During the final weeks of basic training, Sarah's company was preparing for their graduation ceremony. Families would come to watch their sons and daughters officially become soldiers. Sarah's parents had promised to make the long drive from Texas, and she was excited to show them what she had accomplished. The uniform that had once been just a dream now felt like a second skin. She wore it with pride, knowing that every crease, every button, and every patch represented her dedication and hard work. The night before graduation, Sarah was cleaning her gear in the barracks when Sergeant Rodriguez approached her bunk. The older woman sat down on the edge of the bed, something she rarely did. Her usual stern expression was replaced with something that looked almost like concern. She told Sarah that her performance had been exceptional, but that the real Army would be different from the controlled environment of basic training. She warned her about the challenges that lay ahead, especially for women in the service. Sarah listened carefully to her sergeant's words, but she felt ready for whatever came next. She had proven herself during training, earning the respect of her fellow recruits and her instructors. Her shooting scores were among the highest in her company, and she had been selected as one of the honor graduates. As she polished her boots for the final time before graduation, she thought about her childhood dreams and how far she had come to make them reality. The graduation ceremony was everything Sarah had hoped it would be. Her parents sat in the bleachers, her mother crying tears of pride, while her father watched with an expression she had never seen before. When Sarah marched across the field in perfect formation with her company, she could see him straighten in his seat, his own military bearings showing through despite the years that had passed since his service. After graduation, Sarah was assigned to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, home of the 101st Airborne Division. The base was massive, bustling with activity, and filled with soldiers who carried themselves with the confidence that came from belonging to one of the Army's most elite units. Sarah was assigned to a logistics company, responsible for ensuring that supplies and equipment reached the soldiers who needed them. It wasn't the frontline combat role she had sometimes imagined, but she understood the critical importance of her job. Her new unit was led by Captain Jennifer Hayes, a career officer who had served multiple deployments overseas. Captain Hayes was known for being fair but demanding, expecting excellence from every soldier under her command. During Sarah's first briefing, the captain made it clear that she didn't care about anyone's background, gender, or personal circumstances. What mattered was performance, dedication, and the ability to work as part of a team. Sarah threw herself into her new role with the same enthusiasm she had shown during basic training. She learned the complex systems used to track and distribute supplies, memorized the protocols for handling sensitive equipment, and studied the logistics networks that kept the entire base functioning. Her attention to detail and willingness to work long hours quickly earned her a reputation as a reliable soldier. The other members of her unit were a diverse group of men and women from all over the country. There was Specialist Johnson, a quiet man from Montana who had an almost magical ability to find whatever equipment was needed. Private First Class Williams, a young woman from Georgia who could organize anything, and Sergeant Thompson, a veteran of 2 deployments who served as their squad leader and mentor. Sarah found her place within this group, contributing her skills while learning from their experience. She was living her dream, serving her country, and making a difference. But military life also came with unexpected challenges. The physical demands of the job were constant, requiring soldiers to maintain peak fitness while managing heavy equipment and working in all weather conditions. The emotional demands were equally challenging, as soldiers had to be ready to deploy at a moment's notice, leaving behind families and civilian lives for months at a time. Sarah adapted to the rhythm of military life, learning to balance the demands of her job with the need to maintain her personal relationships. She wrote letters home regularly, keeping her parents informed about her experiences while being careful not to worry them with details about the more dangerous aspects of military service. Her mother's letters were filled with news from home and gentle reminders to take care of herself, while her father's shorter notes usually contained practical advice about military life drawn from his own experience. The months passed quickly as Sarah settled into her role. She was promoted to Private First Class, a recognition of her hard work and dedication. The additional responsibility that came with the promotion was something she welcomed, seeing it as another step forward in her military career. She began training newer soldiers, sharing the knowledge and skills she had acquired during her first year of service. As winter approached, rumors began circulating about possible deployment orders. The unit had been training extensively, participating in exercises designed to test their readiness for overseas operations. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness about the possibility of deploying. It would be her first real test as a soldier, an opportunity to put her training to use in support of actual military operations. The announcement came during a company meeting in early December. Captain Hayes stood before the assembled soldiers and informed them that they would be deploying to Afghanistan in support of ongoing operations there. The deployment would last 12 months, and they would be responsible for managing supply operations at a forward operating base. Sarah felt her heart race as she listened to the details, knowing that her childhood dreams were about to become a very real and serious responsibility. Preparation for deployment consumed the following weeks. Every aspect of their equipment, training, and procedures was reviewed and tested. Sarah spent hours studying the terrain and conditions they would face, learning about the culture and customs of the region where they would be stationed. The gravity of the mission weighed on her mind, but she felt ready for the challenge. The night before they were scheduled to leave, Sarah called her parents from the base phone center. Her mother's voice was tight with worry, while her father offered quiet words of encouragement and advice. He reminded her of the things he had taught her about staying alert, following orders, and taking care of her fellow soldiers. As she hung up the phone, Sarah felt the weight of their expectations and their love, knowing that she was carrying more than just her own dreams into this deployment. Standing in her barracks room, surrounded by the packed equipment that would accompany her overseas, Sarah looked at herself in the small mirror mounted on the wall. The uniform that had once represented her childhood dreams now symbolized a very adult responsibility. She was no longer the little girl playing soldier in her backyard. She was a real soldier, trained and ready to serve her country in whatever capacity was required. The next morning arrived with the gray light of dawn filtering through the barracks windows. Sarah woke before her alarm, her mind already focused on the day ahead. Around her, other soldiers were going through their own morning routines, the quiet efficiency of their movements reflecting months of training and preparation. Today would mark the beginning of a new chapter in Sarah's military career, one that would test everything she had learned and believed about service, duty, and honor. The flight to Afghanistan seemed to stretch on forever. Sarah sat in the cramped military transport aircraft, surrounded by her fellow soldiers and mountains of equipment. The steady drone of the engines created a constant background noise that made conversation difficult, leaving each soldier alone with their thoughts about what lay ahead. Sarah stared out the small window, watching the landscape change from the familiar green of Kentucky to the endless blue of the ocean, then to the brown and tan colors of the Middle East. When they finally landed at Bagram Airfield, the heat hit them like a physical blow. Even in the early morning hours, the temperature was already climbing toward what would become a scorching day. Sarah shouldered her pack and followed her unit across the tarmac, taking in her first glimpses of Afghanistan. The mountains in the distance were stark and beautiful in their harshness, rising dramatically from the desert floor. The base itself was a sprawling complex of buildings, vehicles, and activity that seemed to operate around the clock. Their final destination was Forward Operating Base Phoenix, a smaller installation about 2 hours' drive from Bagram. The convoy that would take them there consisted of armored vehicles and experienced drivers who had made this journey many times before. As they loaded their gear and took their assigned seats, the convoy commander briefed them on the route and the security procedures they would follow. Sarah felt her training kick in as she checked her equipment and mentally reviewed the protocols they had practiced. The journey to FOB Phoenix took them through some of the most beautiful and dangerous terrain Sarah had ever seen. The road wound through mountain passes and valleys where ancient civilizations had traveled for thousands of years. Along the way, they passed small villages where children waved at the passing vehicles and farmers worked fields that seemed unchanged by time. But the beauty was tempered by the constant awareness of potential threats, the knowledge that danger could come from any direction at any moment. FOB Phoenix itself was a testament to American military ingenuity. What had once been an empty piece of desert had been transformed into a functioning base complete with living quarters, dining facilities, maintenance shops, and operational centers. Concrete barriers and razor wires surrounded the perimeter, while guard towers provided constant surveillance of the surrounding area. It was a small piece of America carved out of the Afghan landscape, a place where soldiers could live and work while carrying out their mission. Sarah's first weeks at FOB Phoenix were a whirlwind of orientation and adjustment. The logistics operation she was part of was far more complex than anything she had experienced during training. Supply convoys arrived daily, bringing everything from food and water to ammunition and vehicle parts. Each delivery had to be carefully inspected, cataloged, and distributed to the various units on the base. The work was demanding, requiring attention to detail and the ability to work efficiently under pressure. The living conditions took some getting used to. Sarah shared a small room with 3 other female soldiers in a building that had been constructed from shipping containers. Privacy was limited, and personal space was at a premium. But the women in her unit quickly bonded, supporting each other through the challenges of deployment life. They shared stories about home, dreams about the future, and the daily frustrations and victories that came with military service in a combat zone. Captain Hayes proved to be an exceptional leader, somehow managing to keep the unit focused and motivated despite the challenging conditions. She led by example, working alongside her soldiers during long shifts and never asking them to do anything she wasn't willing to do herself. Under her leadership, the logistics operation ran with clockwork precision, earning recognition from higher command and the respect of the other units they supported. The work itself was more dangerous than Sarah had initially realized. Supply convoys were frequent targets for attacks, and the soldiers responsible for logistics operations had to be constantly alert. Sarah learned to read the subtle signs that might indicate trouble, changes in local traffic patterns, unusual behavior by civilians near the base, or intelligence reports about planned attacks. She developed the heightened awareness that all soldiers in combat zones needed to survive. One particularly challenging assignment involved organizing a resupply mission to a remote outpost that had been cut off by severe weather. The outpost was running low on essential supplies, including medical equipment and ammunition. Captain Hayes selected Sarah to help plan and coordinate the mission, recognizing her organizational skills and attention to detail. The planning process took days, involving coordination with aviation units, weather forecasters, and security teams. The mission itself was executed flawlessly, with helicopters successfully delivering the needed supplies despite difficult flying conditions. Sarah watched from the operations center as the aircraft disappeared into the mountain passes, knowing that soldiers at the remote outpost were depending on the success of the mission. When word came back that the supplies had been delivered safely, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction that went beyond personal accomplishment. She had played a direct role in supporting soldiers who were risking their lives for their country. As the months passed, Sarah's confidence and expertise continued to grow. She was promoted to specialist, a recognition of her excellent performance and leadership potential. The additional responsibility that came with the promotion included training newer soldiers who arrived as replacements and serving as a team leader for certain operations. Sarah took these new responsibilities seriously, remembering her own early days in the unit and the guidance she had received from more experienced soldiers. The deployment also provided Sarah with insights into the complexity of military operations in Afghanistan. She learned about the cultural and political factors that influenced their mission, the importance of building relationships with local communities, and the challenges of operating in a country with a long history of conflict. These lessons went far beyond the technical aspects of logistics. giving her a broader understanding of the role the military played in international affairs. Communication with home became a vital part of maintaining morale during the deployment. Sarah wrote letters and emails regularly, sharing carefully edited versions of her experiences with her family and friends. Her parents' responses were always filled with pride and worry in equal measure, while letters from friends back home provided welcome reminders of the life that was waiting for her return. These connections to home served as an anchor, reminding her why she was serving and what she was working to protect. She also participated in morale events organized by the base chaplain and mental health professionals, understanding the importance of taking care of both her physical and emotional well-being. One of the most memorable experiences of Sarah's deployment came during a visit by high-ranking military officials. The base was chosen to host a delegation that included several generals and senior officers who were reviewing operations throughout the region. The logistics unit was selected to brief the visitors on their operations, and Sarah was chosen to present the portion of the briefing dealing with supply chain management. Standing before the assembled officers, Sarah felt nervous but prepared. She had spent days rehearsing her presentation, reviewing every detail of their operations, and anticipating possible questions. As she spoke, she could see the officers listening intently, occasionally nodding in approval or asking clarifying questions. When she finished, one of the generals commended her on the thoroughness of her presentation and the obvious professionalism of her unit. The visit served as validation for all the hard work the unit had put in during their deployment. Sarah felt proud not just of her own performance, but of the entire team that had made their success possible. It was a reminder that their work, while not always glamorous, was essential to the overall mission and was recognized by leaders at the highest levels of the military. As her deployment neared its end, Sarah found herself reflecting on the experiences of the past year. She had grown tremendously as a soldier and, as a person, gaining confidence in her abilities and a deeper understanding of the military's role in the world. The challenges she had faced had tested her in ways she never could have imagined, but she had met each challenge with determination and professionalism. The bonds she had formed with her fellow soldiers were unlike any relationships she had experienced before. They had shared dangers, frustrations, and victories together, creating connections that would last long after the deployment ended. These men and women had become more than colleagues. They were family, united by their shared service and commitment to the mission. The final weeks of the deployment were filled with preparation for the return home and the transition of responsibilities to the unit that would replace them. Sarah worked tirelessly to document procedures and train her replacement, wanting to ensure that the high standards her unit had maintained would continue after their departure. It was important to her that the soldiers who would take over their mission would have every advantage possible to succeed. When the day finally came to leave FOB Phoenix, Sarah experienced mixed emotions. She was excited to return home and reunite with her family, but she also felt a sense of loss at leaving a place where she had grown so much and accomplished so much. As the convoy pulled away from the base for the last time, she looked back at the collection of buildings and barriers that had been her home for a year, knowing that this experience would stay with her forever. The journey home reversed the route they had taken a year earlier, but Sarah was a different person making this trip. She had proven herself under the most challenging conditions imaginable, had led other soldiers successfully, and had contributed to important military operations. The uniform that had once represented her childhood dreams now represented hard-earned experience, professional competence, and a deep commitment to service that had been tested and proven in the crucible of deployment. Returning home from Afghanistan felt like stepping into a different world. Sarah had grown so accustomed to the rhythms of deployment life that the familiar surroundings of Fort Campbell seemed almost foreign to her. The base looked exactly the same, but Sarah herself had changed profoundly during her year overseas. The experiences she had gained, the responsibilities she had shouldered, and the bonds she had formed with her fellow soldiers had transformed her from an eager young recruit into a seasoned veteran. The reintegration process was more challenging than Sarah had anticipated. The Army provided briefings and counseling sessions designed to help returning soldiers adjust to life back home, but the emotional and psychological aspects of the transition were deeply personal. Sarah found herself missing the clear sense of purpose that had defined every day of her deployment. At FOB Phoenix, every task had obvious importance and immediate consequences. Back at Fort Campbell, the daily routine of garrison life seemed mundane by comparison. Sarah was assigned to a new position within the logistics company, this time working directly for Captain Hayes, who had also returned from the deployment. The captain had been impressed by Sarah's performance in Afghanistan and wanted to give her additional responsibilities that would prepare her for future leadership roles. Sarah's new duties included training programs for soldiers preparing for deployment and serving as a mentor for younger soldiers who were just beginning their military careers. The work was rewarding in different ways than her deployment experience had been. Sarah found deep satisfaction in sharing her knowledge and experience with soldiers who were where she had been just 2 years earlier. She remembered her own nervousness and excitement as a new soldier and tried to provide the guidance and support that she wished she had received. Her approach was practical and honest, focusing on the realities of military life while emphasizing the importance of professionalism and teamwork. One of Sarah's first major assignments in her new role was developing a training program for female soldiers who were preparing for deployment. The program was designed to address some of the unique challenges that women faced in combat zones, from practical considerations about equipment and facilities to more complex issues involving leadership and unit cohesion. Sarah drew on her own experiences to create training scenarios that were realistic and relevant. The program was well received by both the soldiers who participated and the leadership who observed the training sessions. Sarah's credibility as a combat veteran lent weight to her instruction, and her ability to communicate complex concepts in simple, practical terms made the training effective. Word of the program's success spread throughout the brigade, and Sarah was asked to present her training model to other units preparing for deployment. During this period, Sarah also began pursuing additional education opportunities. The Army offered tuition assistance programs that allowed soldiers to take college courses during their off-duty hours. Sarah enrolled in a business management program at a local university, seeing education as another way to prepare herself for increased responsibilities within the military. Balancing her military duties with academic work was challenging, but Sarah had learned during her deployment that she was capable of handling much more than she had originally thought possible. The college courses provided Sarah with new perspectives on leadership and organizational management that complemented her military training. She found herself applying concepts from her business classes to her work with the logistics company, looking for ways to improve efficiency and effectiveness. Her professors were impressed by the practical experience she brought to classroom discussions, and her fellow students were often curious about her military service. Sarah's growing reputation as a knowledgeable and reliable soldier led to additional opportunities for professional development. She was selected to attend the Army's Warrior Leader Course, an advanced training program designed to prepare soldiers for promotion to sergeant. The course was intensive, covering everything from small unit tactics to administrative procedures, and it challenged Sarah to demonstrate her leadership abilities under pressure. The Warrior Leader Course was held at Fort Gordon, Georgia, and brought together soldiers from units across the Army. Sarah found herself learning alongside infantrymen, military police officers, medics, and soldiers from many other specialties. The diversity of the group provided valuable insights into the different ways that the Army operated and the various roles that soldiers played in supporting the overall mission. One of the most challenging aspects of the course was the field training exercises that tested students' ability to lead small groups of soldiers in simulated combat situations. Sarah had to demonstrate her ability to make quick decisions under pressure, communicate effectively with subordinates and superiors, and adapt to changing circumstances. The scenarios were designed to be as realistic as possible, forcing students to apply their training in conditions that closely resembled actual combat operations. Sarah's performance during the field exercises was outstanding. Her deployment experience had given her confidence in high-pressure situations, and her natural leadership abilities had been refined through months of actual operational responsibility. The instructors noted her ability to remain calm under pressure and her talent for motivating other soldiers to perform at their best. When the course concluded, Sarah graduated with honors and was recommended for promotion to sergeant. The promotion to sergeant came with significantly increased responsibilities. Sarah was now a non-commissioned officer, responsible for the direct supervision of junior soldiers and the successful completion of important missions. She was assigned to lead a squad within the logistics company, overseeing the work of 8 soldiers and serving as their primary mentor and advisor. The transition from being responsible primarily for her own performance to being responsible for the performance of others was significant. Sarah approached her new role with the same dedication and attention to detail that had characterized her previous assignments. She worked to understand the strengths and weaknesses of each soldier in her squad, developing training plans and work assignments that maximized their contributions while helping them improve in areas where they needed development. Her approach was firm but fair, setting high standards while providing the support and guidance necessary to meet those standards. The squad that Sarah inherited had a mixed reputation within the company. Previous leadership had struggled to maintain discipline and motivation, and some of the soldiers had developed habits that were not up to Army standards. Sarah knew that changing the squad's culture would require patience, consistency, and clear expectations. She began by meeting individually with each soldier, learning about their backgrounds, their goals, and their concerns about their military service. These individual conversations revealed that many of the squad's problems stemmed from a lack of clear direction and inconsistent leadership in the past. The soldiers were capable and motivated, but they had not received the guidance and support they needed to succeed. Sarah developed a plan to address these issues systematically, setting clear expectations, providing regular feedback, and recognizing good performance when it occurred. The transformation of the squad took several months, but Sarah's consistent leadership gradually produced remarkable results. Soldiers who had previously been considered problem cases began to excel in their duties. The squad's performance on inspections and evaluations improved dramatically, and their reputation within the company shifted from negative to positive. Captain Hayes took notice of the changes and commended Sarah for her effective leadership. One of the key factors in Sarah's success as a squad leader was her ability to connect with soldiers from diverse backgrounds. Her squad included men and women from different regions of the country, different educational levels, and different cultural backgrounds. Sarah worked to understand and appreciate these differences while maintaining the unity and cohesion that were essential for effective military operations. She created an environment where every soldier felt valued and respected while maintaining the discipline and professionalism that the Army required. Sarah's success as a squad leader led to additional responsibilities within the company. She was asked to serve on various committees and working groups that addressed issues ranging from equipment procurement to training development. Her practical experience and demonstrated leadership abilities made her a valuable contributor to these efforts, and she gained exposure to aspects of military operations that extended far beyond her immediate responsibilities. One particularly significant assignment involved serving on a team that was developing new procedures for handling sensitive equipment during deployment operations. The team included representatives from multiple companies within the battalion, and their work would influence how thousands of soldiers conducted critical operations. Sarah's deployment experience and her understanding of practical operational challenges made her contributions especially valuable. The project required Sarah to travel to various military installations to observe current procedures and interview soldiers who had recent deployment experience. These visits provided her with insights into the wide variety of approaches that different units use to handle similar challenges. She was able to identify best practices and innovative solutions that could be adapted and standardized across the brigade. The final report that Sarah's team produced was well received by senior leadership and was eventually adopted as the standard procedure for the entire division. Sarah felt tremendous pride in contributing to improvements that would benefit thousands of soldiers and enhance the effectiveness of future operations. It was another example of how her individual efforts could have impacts that extended far beyond her immediate unit. As Sarah continued to grow in her role as a non-commissioned officer, she began to think seriously about her long-term career goals. The Army offered opportunities for continued advancement, additional education, and specialization in various fields. Sarah had proven herself capable of handling increased responsibility, and her superiors had indicated that she had excellent potential for further promotion. But she also needed to consider her personal goals and the kind of life she wanted to build for herself. The decision about her future would require careful consideration of many factors, including her family obligations, her educational goals, and her desire to continue serving her country. Sarah knew that whatever path she chose would be influenced by the experiences she had gained and the confidence she had developed during her years of military service. The uniform that had once represented childhood dreams now represented a foundation of experience and accomplishment that would serve her well regardless of what challenges lay ahead. The young woman who had walked into the recruitment office in Texas had grown into a seasoned leader who had proven herself under the most demanding conditions imaginable. Sarah's journey from eager recruit to respected non-commissioned officer had been marked by challenges and opportunities that had shaped her character and prepared her for whatever the future might hold. She had learned that true leadership meant serving others, that excellence required constant effort, and that the greatest rewards came from contributing to something larger than oneself. The incident that would change everything began on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning in late spring. Sarah had been serving as a sergeant for 8 months, and her squad had just completed a particularly challenging training exercise that had earned praise from the battalion commander. The soldiers under her leadership had performed flawlessly, demonstrating the high standards that Sarah had worked so hard to instill. As she walked across the company area toward the administrative building to file her after-action report, Sarah felt the satisfaction that came from a job well done. The call to report to the company commander's office came without warning. Sarah had been completing routine paperwork when Specialist Rodriguez approached her desk with a message that Captain Hayes wanted to see her immediately. The urgency in Rodriguez's voice was unusual, and Sarah felt a flutter of concern as she made her way to the commander's office. She reviewed the events of recent weeks in her mind, trying to identify anything that might have prompted such an urgent summons. Captain Hayes was waiting for her with an expression that Sarah had never seen before. The captain, who had always been supportive and encouraging, now looked troubled and uncomfortable. Standing beside her desk was Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, the battalion commander, whose presence immediately signaled that this was no routine meeting. Sarah snapped to attention and rendered a crisp salute, her military-bearing automatic despite the anxiety that was beginning to build in her chest. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison returned her salute and gestured for her to take a seat. His manner was formal but not unkind, and Sarah could see that he was choosing his words carefully. He began by acknowledging Sarah's excellent service record and her outstanding performance as a squad leader, comments that only increased her confusion about the purpose of the meeting. When he finally got to the point, his words hit her like a physical blow. An allegation had been made against Sarah by another soldier in the company. The details were serious enough to warrant a formal investigation, and Army regulations required that Sarah be relieved of her duties as a squad leader pending the outcome of that investigation. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison emphasized that the relief was procedural rather than punitive, but Sarah understood the devastating implications immediately. Her career, her reputation, and everything she had worked so hard to build were suddenly in jeopardy. The specific nature of the allegation was not disclosed to Sarah during that initial meeting, which only added to her shock and confusion. She was told that the investigation would be conducted by the Criminal Investigation Division and that she would be assigned to administrative duties within the company headquarters while the process unfolded. The meeting concluded with instructions to report to the first sergeant the following morning for her new assignment and a reminder that she was not to discuss the matter with anyone. Sarah left the commander's office in a state of numbness that made it difficult to process what had just happened. She walked mechanically back to her desk, her mind struggling to understand how her world had been turned upside down so suddenly and completely. The soldiers in her squad looked up as she passed, and she realized that she would have to tell them that she was no longer their squad leader without being able to explain why. The conversation with her squad was one of the most difficult moments of Sarah's military career. She gathered them in the break room and told them simply that she was being reassigned to different duties and that Staff Sergeant Williams would be taking over as their squad leader. The soldiers looked confused and concerned, asking questions that Sarah couldn't answer. She could see the trust and respect in their eyes, the same trust and respect that she had worked so hard to earn, and she knew that her inability to explain the situation would damage those relationships regardless of the eventual outcome of the investigation. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her quarters, trying to make sense of what had happened. She reviewed every interaction she had had with soldiers in the company, searching for something that might have been misinterpreted or misunderstood. The uncertainty was almost unbearable, made worse by the knowledge that rumors and speculation would inevitably spread throughout the unit. In the close-knit environment of a military company, it was impossible to keep such matters completely confidential. The administrative duties that Sarah was assigned to were mundane and isolating. She found herself filing papers, updating databases, and performing clerical tasks that required none of the leadership skills she had developed over the years. The work itself was not difficult, but the psychological impact of being removed from a position of responsibility was profound. Sarah had defined herself through her role as a leader, and without that role, she felt lost and disconnected from the purpose that had driven her throughout her military career. The investigation process moved slowly, with interviews, document reviews, and background checks that seemed to take forever. Sarah was interviewed multiple times by investigators from CID, each session covering the same ground with slightly different questions. The investigators were professional but thorough, leaving no doubt that they were taking the matter seriously. Sarah answered every question honestly and completely, but she felt increasingly frustrated by her inability to know exactly what she was accused of. During this period, Sarah's relationships within the company became strained and complicated. Some soldiers continued to treat her with the same respect they had always shown, while others seemed uncertain about how to interact with her. The isolation was particularly difficult for someone who had thrived on the camaraderie and teamwork that defined military life. Sarah found herself eating alone in the dining facility and spending her off-duty hours in solitary activities that kept her away from the social areas of the base. The stress of the investigation began to take a toll on Sarah's physical and mental health. She had always prided herself on her fitness and military bearing, but the uncertainty and anxiety were affecting her sleep, her appetite, and her ability to concentrate. She considered seeking help from the base mental health services, but she worried that doing so might be seen as an admission of guilt or instability that could further damage her position. Captain Hayes maintained a professional relationship with Sarah during this period, but their interactions lacked the warmth and mentorship that had characterized their previous working relationship. Sarah understood that the captain was in a difficult position, needing to maintain the appearance of impartiality while the investigation proceeded. But the loss of that supportive relationship was another blow to Sarah's morale and confidence. The weeks stretched into months as the investigation continued. Sarah learned that such processes could take considerable time, especially when they involved serious allegations that could result in criminal charges or administrative action. She tried to remain patient and professional, but the uncertainty about her future made it difficult to maintain her usual optimistic outlook. She found herself questioning not just the current situation, but also her decision to make the military her career. During one particularly difficult week, Sarah received a letter from her father. He had somehow learned about the investigation, possibly through contacts he maintained with other veterans. His letter was brief, but powerful, reminding Sarah of the values that had guided her throughout her life, and encouraging her to maintain her integrity regardless of the pressure she might face. He wrote about his own experiences with military justice during his service and emphasized that the truth would eventually emerge if she remained patient and honest. The letter from her father provided Sarah with a source of strength that helped her endure the continued uncertainty. She realized that her identity and self-worth could not be entirely dependent on her military rank or position. The experiences she had gained, the soldiers she had led successfully, and the contributions she had made to various missions remained valuable regardless of the outcome of the current investigation. This perspective helped her maintain her dignity and professionalism during a period that tested every aspect of her character. As the investigation entered its fourth month, Sarah began to prepare herself for the possibility that her military career might be ending. She researched veteran benefits, explored educational opportunities, and considered what kind of civilian career might make use of the leadership and organizational skills she had developed. The process was emotionally difficult, but it also helped her realize that she had grown tremendously during her military service and had developed capabilities that would serve her well in any environment. The breakthrough in the investigation came from an unexpected source. Another soldier in the company came forward with information that contradicted key elements of the original allegation. This soldier had initially been reluctant to get involved, but eventually decided that the truth was more important than avoiding conflict. The new information led investigators to re-examine the evidence they had collected and to interview additional witnesses who had not been contacted previously. The investigation that had seemed to be moving toward an uncertain conclusion suddenly shifted in Sarah's favor. The additional evidence and witness statements painted a very different picture of the events in question, one that supported Sarah's account and called into question the credibility of the original allegation. The investigators were thorough in their examination of this new information, but it became increasingly clear that the case against Sarah was not as strong as it had initially appeared. When Lieutenant Colonel Morrison called Sarah back to his office for another meeting, She prepared herself for either vindication or devastating news. The weeks of uncertainty had taught her that nothing in this process was predictable, and she tried to maintain realistic expectations about the outcome. As she walked across the company area toward the commander's office, she noticed soldiers watching her with curiosity and concern, aware that this meeting would likely determine her future. The meeting was brief, but transformative. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison informed Sarah that the investigation had concluded and that no evidence had been found to support the allegations against her. She would be restored to her duties as a squad leader immediately, and her personnel file would reflect the conclusion of the investigation. The relief that Sarah felt was overwhelming, but it was tempered by the realization that the experience had changed her in ways that would never be completely undone. As Sarah prepared to return to her squad leader duties, she reflected on the lessons she had learned during the most challenging period of her military career. The experience had tested her resilience, her integrity, and her commitment to the values that had guided her since joining the Army. She had learned that reputation and trust, once damaged, required considerable effort to rebuild, and that leadership meant accepting responsibility even in the most difficult circumstances. The morning Sarah returned to active duty as squad leader felt like stepping back into a life that had been frozen in time. Her soldiers greeted her with a mixture of relief and awkward uncertainty, unsure how to address the months that had passed without explanation. Sarah understood their confusion and made it her first priority to rebuild the trust and cohesion that her squad had once exemplified. She called a meeting that afternoon, addressing the elephant in the room with characteristic directness while maintaining the professional boundaries that prevented her from sharing details about the investigation. Standing before her 8 soldiers in the same break room where she had delivered the devastating news of her reassignment, Sarah spoke with a clarity and purpose that had been sharpened by months of reflection. She acknowledged that the period of uncertainty had been difficult for everyone and that questions remained unanswered. But she emphasized that their job was to move forward together, maintaining the high standards they had achieved before and continuing to serve their country with professionalism and dedication. The process of rebuilding her squad's effectiveness was more challenging than Sarah had anticipated. During her absence, Staff Sergeant Williams had maintained basic operations, but the special bond that had made the squad exceptional had been weakened. Some soldiers had been transferred to other units, new personnel had arrived, and the carefully crafted team dynamics that Sarah had spent months developing had been disrupted. She realized that she would essentially be starting over, using the lessons she had learned from her first experience as a squad leader, but applying them to a changed situation. One of the new soldiers assigned to her squad was Private Martinez, a young man from California who had recently completed basic training and advanced individual training. Martinez was eager but inexperienced, reminding Sarah of herself when she had first arrived at Fort Campbell years earlier. She saw in him an opportunity to apply the mentorship techniques she had developed, helping him navigate the transition from student to active duty soldier while contributing to the squad's overall mission. Sarah's approach to leadership had been refined by her recent experiences. The months of isolation and uncertainty had given her a deeper appreciation for the human aspects of military service. She understood more clearly than ever that soldiers were not just resources to be managed, but individuals with their own hopes, fears, and challenges. This perspective influenced her interactions with every member of her squad, leading to more personalized approaches to training, counseling, and motivation. The squad's first major test under Sarah's restored leadership came during a brigade-wide logistics exercise designed to simulate the challenges of supporting combat operations in a hostile environment. The exercise would require coordination between multiple units, precise timing, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Sarah saw the exercise as an opportunity to demonstrate that her squad had returned to its previous level of excellence, but she also knew that any failures would reflect on her restored leadership. Preparation for the exercise consumed several weeks and required Sarah to draw on all the experience she had gained during her deployment and subsequent assignments. She worked with her soldiers to review procedures, rehearse critical tasks, and develop contingency plans for various scenarios they might encounter. The new members of the squad required additional training, but the veterans who had served with Sarah before brought institutional knowledge that proved invaluable. Private Martinez proved to be a quick learner and a valuable addition to the team. His enthusiasm reminded Sarah of her own early days in the Army, and She found satisfaction in helping him develop the skills and confidence he would need to succeed. She assigned him to work closely with Specialist Johnson, the experienced soldier from Montana whose quiet competence made him an excellent mentor for newer personnel. The exercise itself unfolded over 5 days and tested every aspect of the squad's capabilities. They were required to establish supply points, coordinate with transportation units, manage inventory under pressure, and respond to simulated emergencies. Sarah found herself drawing on lessons learned during her deployment to Afghanistan, applying practical experience to training scenarios that closely resembled actual operational conditions. On the 3rd day of the exercise, the squad faced their most significant challenge when a simulated attack disrupted their planned supply route and forced them to implement alternative procedures under extreme time pressure. Sarah's leadership during this crisis demonstrated the growth she had experienced during her months away from squad leader duties. She remained calm under pressure, made quick but thoughtful decisions, and maintained effective communication with both her soldiers and higher headquarters. The squad's performance during the exercise exceeded expectations and earned recognition from the exercise evaluation team. Sarah felt tremendous pride in her soldiers' accomplishments, but she was even more satisfied by the renewed sense of teamwork and mutual confidence that had developed within the group. The exercise had served its intended purpose of rebuilding the squad's cohesion while demonstrating their technical competence. Following the successful completion of the exercise, Captain Hayes called Sarah to her office for what turned out to be a career-changing conversation. The captain had been watching Sarah's progress since her return to duty and had been impressed by her resilience and renewed effectiveness as a leader. She informed Sarah that she was being recommended for promotion to staff sergeant, a recognition of her performance and her potential for continued growth within the non-commissioned officer ranks. The promotion recommendation came with an assignment to attend the Advanced Leader Course, the military education program that prepared sergeants for senior non-commissioned officer positions. The course would be held at Fort Gordon and would last several months, providing Sarah with advanced training in leadership, tactics, and military operations. It was an opportunity that reflected the confidence that her superiors had in her abilities and her future potential. Sarah accepted the promotion and the training opportunity with gratitude and determination. The months of uncertainty and challenge had taught her valuable lessons about herself and about leadership that would serve her well in more senior positions. She understood that her experiences, both positive and difficult, had prepared her for greater responsibilities and had given her insights that she could share with other soldiers. Before departing for the Advanced Leader Course, Sarah spent considerable time ensuring that her squad was prepared for her absence and that her replacement would have all the information needed to maintain the unit's effectiveness. She worked individually with each soldier, providing guidance and encouragement while documenting lessons learned and best practices that could benefit future leaders. The conversation with Private Martinez was particularly meaningful for Sarah. The young soldier had grown tremendously during his time in the squad, developing from an uncertain recruit into a confident and capable team member. Sarah could see echoes of her own journey in his development, and she emphasized the importance of maintaining high standards while supporting his fellow soldiers. She knew that soldiers like Martinez represented the future of the Army and that investing in their development was one of the most important responsibilities of leadership. The Advanced Leader Course proved to be as challenging and rewarding as Sarah had expected. The curriculum covered advanced topics in leadership theory, small unit tactics, and military operations that expanded her understanding of the Army's role and capabilities. She found herself studying alongside sergeants from units throughout the Army, learning from their experiences while sharing her own insights gained through deployment and various leadership positions. One of the most valuable aspects of the course was the opportunity to examine case studies of military operations and leadership challenges from throughout Army history. Sarah found herself analyzing situations where leaders had faced difficult decisions under pressure, learning from both their successes and their failures. These studies reinforced her understanding that effective leadership often required moral courage as much as technical competence. The field training exercises during the course were particularly intense, placing students in scenarios that required them to lead larger groups of soldiers while managing complex tactical situations. Sarah's deployment experience and her proven ability to perform under pressure served her well during these exercises. She consistently demonstrated the ability to make sound decisions quickly while maintaining effective communication with both subordinates and superiors. When Sarah graduated from the Advanced Leader course, she did so with honors and with the confidence that came from having her abilities validated by some of the Army's most experienced instructors. The course had not only prepared her for promotion to Staff Sergeant, but had also given her a broader perspective on military operations and leadership that would influence her approach to future assignments. Returning to Fort Campbell as a newly promoted Staff Sergeant, Sarah was assigned to a position in the company headquarters that involved training and mentoring junior non-commissioned officers. The role required her to work with squad leaders throughout the company, sharing her experience and helping them develop the skills needed to be effective leaders. It was a natural progression for someone who had demonstrated both technical competence and the ability to inspire others. The assignment also brought Sarah into regular contact with the battalion commander and other senior officers, providing her with exposure to higher-level decision-making processes and strategic planning. She found herself contributing to discussions about training programs, personnel policies, and operational planning that would affect hundreds of soldiers. It was a reminder of how much she had grown since her early days as an eager recruit. One afternoon, while reviewing training schedules in the company headquarters, Sarah was approached by Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, the same officer who had delivered the devastating news about the investigation months earlier. This time, however, his purpose was entirely different. He had come to inform her that she was being considered for selection to attend Officer Candidate School, a program that would prepare her to become a commissioned officer. The opportunity to become an officer represented a dramatic change in career direction, one that would require additional education and training, but would also open doors to leadership positions at levels Sarah had never previously considered. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison explained that her combination of technical competence, proven leadership ability, and resilience under pressure made her an ideal candidate for the program. As Sarah considered this unexpected opportunity, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the little girl playing soldier in her Texas backyard to a seasoned non-commissioned officer being offered the chance to become a commissioned officer, her path had been marked by challenges that had tested her resolve and opportunities that had allowed her to grow. The uniform that had once represented childhood dreams now symbolized a foundation of experience and achievement that had prepared her for whatever challenges lay ahead. The decision about Officer Candidate School would require careful consideration, but Sarah knew that whatever choice she made would be informed by the lessons she had learned throughout her military career. She had discovered that true leadership meant serving others, that excellence required constant effort and dedication, and that the greatest rewards came from contributing to something larger than oneself. These principles would guide her regardless of the path she chose to follow.